Hello, Disney cruisers. It's Robyn from the Go-To Family, and as promised, I'm back giving you an update from our recent trip aboard the Disney Fantasy on April 9th. So in this vlog, I'm going to be telling you about all the changes we saw about a week and a half ago with the health and safety protocols and any other things they might be bringing back to Disney Cruise Line now that they're relaxing most of the onboard restrictions when it comes to health and safety protocols for COVID-19. We did sail in March, so there was a very huge difference from early March to this cruise on April 9th. And before I get into everything, I will say this cruise seemed a lot more normal, like almost pre-pandemic sailings than the one in March. First off, let's get into the port testing at Port Canaveral. So in early March, you were still required to take a PCR test. That changed about, I think the last week in March, they scrapped the PCR testing for anti-aging testing. I did take the video of the PCR testing at Port Canaveral in March, but it did change when we were on April 9th. So the process was very similar when it came to the testing. You arrived at the port, you left your bags with the porter, you walk across the street, and the tents were exactly the same and everything. The difference is, as I said, it is now anti-aging testing. And I will say the process was a little more relaxed. Like I could tell they were just a little more relaxed with everything. It seemed a little less stuffy maybe. And the process was actually a little faster. The PCR testing took about 45 minutes or so. Testing now with the anti-aging only takes about 10 or so minutes sitting down once you're in the tent, which is a big difference. One difference that I really liked is that the swab is no longer the long PCR test one. It's kind of thicker. The anti-aging is more like a Q-tip, and the Q-tip doesn't really bug your nose when you put it in, especially for kids. So our whole family enjoyed it, especially our 3 children. It was a lot less of a hassle to get them to actually do the testing. So I will say, some people were saying the anti-aging PCR, what's the difference? Well, that's the difference. The testing for an anti-aging is less invasive, I found, and actually the kids found too that it was less invasive and just made the process a little less stressful for us. Just to let everyone know, I did film the actual process of testing once again, but this time it is the anti-aging testing, and I will be posting that video this week, so be sure to look for it later in the week. Let's get to actually boarding the Fantasy cruise ship. So when you board the cruise ship, there is no short little skit from Minnie and Minnie dancing around on the upper floor. When you enter, it's totally been scrapped, and I believe it has been scrapped because the sail away party is coming back. That's right, you heard it. The sail away party is back on the Disney Dream and Magic, and I'm assuming today, Saturday, it will be back on the Disney Fantasy. Now, if you're on the Disney Fantasy, let me know if the sail away party was indeed back today. And for those that don't know what the sail away party is, that is usually around 4 o'clock on the top deck. There's a whole show where Mickey, Minnie, and friends come out and they do a little dance, cheering, and celebrate you embarking on your adventure aboard the ship. And after that, the ship bells ring and the ship starts to move. Talking about parties, the pirate party is back. The pirate night is going to be in full force again aboard all the ships. And when we were on the Disney Fantasy on April 9th that week, they were already making major changes to the whole entire party. They were actually practicing the show on the second to last night. We were on the ship and they were telling no one to take pictures, but I did see a picture of them practicing. So if it is not back yet on the Fantasy, I will be highly surprised because they were getting ready to perform that show on the Fantasy again. And as I said, the full pirate night is back aboard the Dream ship and the Magic ship. If you know any other ships that are back on, like the Wonder, let me know below. When it comes to the capacity aboard the ship, the Fantasy, when we sailed on April 9th, it was at 2,630 passengers about. This was a definite increase from early March. I think in early March we had about 1,800 passengers or so. I could actually notice there were more people aboard the ship than there was in early March. Another big change that we noticed on board is that the Oceaneers Lab and Club is really much more fun for kids to attend than it was in early March and when the sailings aboard Disney Cruise Line started again. As many of you know, kids had to sign up at scheduled times to go to the lab or the Oceaneers Club. You couldn't show up early, you couldn't show up really late, and kids had to stay in the group they arrived with and couldn't venture around the Oceaneers Club or lab at all. They had to stay in one designated area with the cast member that was interacting with them. So my eldest daughter didn't really enjoy this. She's 10, and it's really hard for a 10-year-old to be stuck with younger children and vice versa. It was much harder for her to make friends, and honestly, after a couple of nights, she didn't want to really go to the Oceaneers Club anymore. This time around, we couldn't get her out of the Oceaneers Club. She wanted to stay there the whole entire time, and she made a really great friend there, and they're still in contact. So I'm really happy kids are able to interact, run around, and get that energy that they so desire to get out at the Oceaneers Club. Just to let everyone know, this only applies for children 5 and above. The vaccinated children, unvaccinated children are not allowed to run around the club at this time and must stay in that old kind of method where they're in designated groups, and they must still wear masks in the club. Now, moving on from the Oceaneers Club, because we want to know what you're doing when your kids are in the Oceaneers Club. Well, just to let you know, there is so much more for you guys to do when your kids are in the Oceaneers Club. Now, in March, I have to admit, I found the entertainment a little lacking. There wasn't a lot of nighttime shows, and when there was, you had to wait like 15 to 20 minutes minimum outside waiting just to get in the tube on the Disney Fantasy, and there wasn't a lot of adult 18 plus trivia in the bars and so on, and that's really the only time I get to have kind of adult fun, so I kind of missed that. But on this Disney cruise that we went on in April 9th, there were so many activities again for adults, and I really enjoyed it. So there was lots of 18 plus trivia in O'Gill's, and the tube really has that old entertainment they used to have for adults in the night, trivia, game shows, and scheduled shows with different performers. When we were on the cruise, they actually had a ventriloquist who was kind of like a comedian too, and he was super funny. I think I saw him in previous years, but he was really good. So I do not miss that show. I forget his name, I'm sorry, but he was great. They also had the magician for kids on board, and he also did perform an adult show on the last night of the cruise. So that's also something not to be missed either. And best of all, seeing these shows, doing the trivia, there was no long lineups. You could show up 3 minutes, 2 minutes before the show in the tube, and you would find a spot in the seating area. In Cabanas, you can now serve yourself buffet style. This is changed from early March when a cast member had to serve you your food in the buffet area. They also had to serve you your drinks and so on. That has been completely removed, and now you serve yourself again. I was a little skeptical of this. I mean, I did find the process of buffets and so on, all the touching and stuff, a little, let's say, not that cleanly, especially with kids. I know my kids, and I know your kids probably, and they try their best, but they're not always the cleanest. But I will say I did enjoy it. For the main reason is that there was more selection at Cabanas than there was in March. There was literally everything was back. There was so much selection, and even the carving station was back, and there was lots of selection. They had turkey, roast beef. They had the taco station. They literally had everything. So I really enjoyed the larger selection at Cabanas. So if they're going to have a larger selection because you're serving yourself, I'm all for serving yourself. When it comes to character interaction, this is the only thing that hasn't changed all that much aboard Disney Cruise Line. You are still not allowed to hug the characters. I will say they're a little less strict on the social distancing between characters, and even the princesses were a little more hands-on. They would take their time to sit down and say a couple of things with the kids and ask them questions, and they didn't really do that in early March, so I definitely did see the change from March to April. The princesses were much more relaxed and conversational, and the kids really did enjoy that and wanted to spend more time seeing the characters because it was slightly more relaxed despite not being able to give the characters any hugs. And I do think they're going to change this in the next 2 sailings. I think you'll be allowed to hug the characters, or children will be allowed to hug the characters. I'm not 100% sure, but I do believe that this will change in the next 2 weeks because it has changed at Disneyland and Disney World. Did we enjoy the cruise? I think that would be a definite yes. I actually believe we enjoyed this cruise a little better than the one in March because there was just a little less restrictions. Overall, this cruise felt very similar to pre-pandemic cruises I had taken. And the only really difference I found this time around was the lack of sailaway party and the pirate night show. And those are basically returning, so it will feel really like a pre-pandemic cruise in my opinion. I hope you enjoyed this brief update on the changes we experienced when sailing on the ship about 2 weeks ago. Do you have any questions? Please let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you'll see all our recent videos we're going to be publishing from this trip aboard the Disney Fantasy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.